I just want to take it back to that. We started to go into run, training, because I think that's what a lot of our listeners kind of affiliate this with is this idea. They see themselves as runners. They know how to put together a good plan, which would be laying a foundation, then having a goal and going after it from there. And I love the analogy of how to connect financial literacy and financial fitness, sometimes we could call it, to
like a Fitbit for your credit.
like a Fitbit for your credit.
Exactly.
And what are like the pieces, if you were to like have me walking into Savvy Money, if it was an actual place, what would be those three things potentially that you would highlight as very top level of things that I should, if I've had my head in the sand, because I think a lot of people do this and I've done this myself, is not known, been very confident in my financial literacy. And so then I'm like, well, then I don't want to know anything and I don't want to look at my accounts. And frankly, I'm scared of my credit score. I avoid it, or I put my, I kind of just walk blindly around.
Yeah, well, first of all, I would
start?
say the premise, before we get into the score and what drives the score,
Right.
right? I would say, well, why do you care? Why do you
Oh, that's good.
care that you have a good credit score, right?
Right.
Well, if you look at the interest rates you're charged, they're generally predicated on your credit score. So your
Mm-hmm.
cost of money on actually financing things that you want, whether it be a boat or a motorcycle or a car
Right.
or a house or
Yeah.
a vacation or whatever it is going to be predicated. So that dollar amount, whether you're paying 5% or 3% or 18%,
Yeah.
is a lot of money to pay to borrow. And
Yeah.
that's money that ultimately could be invested down the road.
Right.
So managing your credit could be one of the most important things you do early on as it relates to what you're going to pay for money and what you're ultimately going to be able to have or invest down the road.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's
a great
first
note.
thing is, why is this crazy number even important, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
Then I would say, okay, let's look at what you can control and what in there are the big drivers. Payment history is 40%, right? So I better pay my bills on time. That's kind of important. So
Yep.
we take you in and show you each one of your trade lines and what your bills look like. And you may find one on there, and this happens a lot, that there's an error on your report. And someone goes, wow, I didn't know that delinquent thing was even on there, right? So there's a process to dispute it and to say, well, I wasn't late, or to get the financial institution to take that off. Also, if you're behind on your bills, to at least start to pay as agreed. And over time, that will get better. Initially, that's going to hurt your credit, right?
Yep.
The next, provided, let's say you're paying all your bills on time, you don't have any late.
Mm-hmm. You're knocking it out of the park so far. Yeah.
And the next thing is utilization rate, the one I talked about, right?
Right.
And that's having plenty of credit limits and not using that much of the credit, right? That's going to be the next thing.
Is there an ideal percentage, JB?
So you want that percentage under 30%. You'd like to keep it under 30% because lenders will view you as risky if you start getting up towards 60, 70, 80%. That means you're using a lot of your available and you don't have a lot of room.
Yeah, it's like it's almost creating like wiggle room, or creating almost a cushion for who knows what, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And
Managing
that
risk.
It's the same premise of why would you want an emergency fund, right? Like same kind of idea. And I'm going to get to stress here in a second in terms of correlation between stress and money and fitness. But having that cushion of either an emergency fund is like, whew, car broke down or something happened with one of the kids.
Medical bills. It seems like medical bills are always the ones that creep up on people. They're like, how did you know I was going to fall snowboarding or something like that? And you're like, you didn't.
That's right.
So,
yeah. Or you're not able to work or whatever. So, having supplemental insurance probably isn't a bad idea either, depending on how big your nest egg is in order to absorb those expenses. So, so I would say that the next thing is utilization rate. After that, it's probably mix of credit. So having, a mortgage on there would be great for your credit score. a car loan would be great to have on there. So an installment loan, so not just only credit card debt. The bureau will look at the mix of credit that you have, and then how long you have it, right? So my earlier point of closing a card, let's say you've had a card for 15 years and the last one you got since then has been 5 years, you close that account and remove the 15-year history. So leave that account open. That's your credit history. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's good. And I think you can negotiate sometimes with organizations if you're not, and one thing you'll need to do if you have a credit card is you don't have to carry a balance, but spend on it once in a while so it stays open. Because lenders, sometimes if they see that credit available and you never use the card, they can just close it.
Wow. I've never
so just
heard
using it once in a while is a good idea.
Yeah. So you touched on stress, or we started to, and this is something you and I talked about in kind of our pre-interview, but I thought this was the most dynamic piece, which, I mean, stress kills people. It literally kills people, like from a health perspective. We're talking about running, and oftentimes we utilize it as a stress reliever.
Yeah.
But why are we so stressed? You know, like what is causing that initial stress? And I think money it might be it, or at least at some level.
I think the stat, I wrote it down, where is my note? 72%. Think about this. 72% of people polled are stressed about money. 72%. That's a big number.
I mean, guilty, I guess, right? Like, and then there's got to be a sliding scale of those 72%. Some it's taking over their lives, right? And some are just kind of stressed about
some are like
every day.
Mildly stressed, like you asked the question. Some it's causing, they've actually done correlations with not showing up to work, like having issues with employers knowing that there's money issues and stress issues related to finances causing people's work to be, suffer, right? And not even going to work, or having issues with sleep or anxiety or whatever. So, getting control of your finances, and to all the runners on the line, like getting control of your finances is super important to being a good runner, because you're going to be a little stress-free. You're going to have your energy. Stress is a huge sapper of energy, right?
Right. And that would go to performance and everything in life. So if we're talking just about running, great. But job performance in as a good friend, as a good husband, as a good partner, as a good dad, like you're talking about eliminating something that is preventing you from doing all the other things well, I think, on this whole thing. And I can't imagine how it's been in the last year. And maybe you have even probably seen elements of this.
Well, there's been a
couple
things that have
increasing.
So, well, it depends on what your job was, right? If you're in food service, or there were so many
hospitality, hotels.
Exactly. I mean, I can't imagine, right? The one nice thing that lenders did was that they did postpone reporting any delinquencies to the bureau during that time. So there was deferment, right, for consumers if you called and made arrangements. So that's kind of good that you at least prolong, your not paying your bills to the credit bureau. But ultimately, that doesn't go away, right? You're still going to have that obligation. So you're right. Yeah, that's where having, for if anything, COVID's taught us, it's like, wow, I better have an emergency fund. You know what I mean? Like, and they recommend 6 months, but maybe people should strive for more than 6 months now, having given what just happened, right?
Yeah.
And so
it hasn't been. It's been a year now. We're at 1 year today, or I remember when we were doing it. So
exactly. So I would say that, listen, you take baby steps on any of this stuff, just like training. You're not going to go out and run. You're just starting your training. You're not going to go out and blitz 10 miles, right?
Right.
Like, work up to it and create good habits. Whenever you're saving, you take a certain percentage and you put that aside, and then you graduate that percentage up as you can. But I will tell you that building of, just like tracking your credit score and seeing it improve, watching that savings account grow and having that peace of mind is amazing, right? Like it's removing a weight off people's shoulders.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, and what I like about the way you're describing it is that you're not overcomplicating it. So this is how I like to talk to runners is like, yeah, you can't just go out and run a marathon. We've got to like start with things that you already know. You've got to sleep right. You have to like
Yeah,
eat
you have
right
to eat.
and these different things. And they're not complicated. This doesn't take a scientist or some kind of crazy coach. It just needs to know that don't spend more money than you have. Like work on
Yeah,
that emergency, Dave.
and to
You
that
know?
point, so Jean Chatzky is our director of education at Savvy Money, and she wrote a book called H Proof. And H Proof took into account the your health and your
Yep.
finance, and she co-wrote it with a doctor. And for those on the line, I think it's a book worth getting.
Yeah.
It talks about a couple things in that book that are pretty interesting. One, and guess what, people? We're going to live longer than you think, right? People are living longer. And so therefore, if you're going to live longer, what do you need?
That's great.
You need a little more money to kind of,
Right.
have that lifestyle that you want. So start
Right.
planning on living longer and start planning for the finances you're going to need during that time. She also talks about, it's important to create good habits back to running or different things you do for your daily routine. They say it takes 21 days to create a
Oh
habit.
yeah, I've heard that.
But then
Yep.
if you create that habit, then that just becomes part of your routine. I don't have to think about that anymore, right?
It's
So
just what
you
you
get
do.
into a regular running routine, or you get in, like, creating those habits is actually good.
Yep.
And maybe it's, picking when you're going to pay your bills and not putting it all off to the end,
hmm
or putting aside a little money out of every paycheck to go off to the side, and you're just going to force yourself to do that, right?
Yep.
On the budgeting side, it's, hey, taking a little stock in where you're spending. Like, write everything down that you spent for the last 3 months,
hmm
and look at that and say, is there 10% or 15% that I could cut out of this? Have that discipline to do it, and set a goal and say, you know what? I'm going to spend, it's hard to budget by line item, but you
Yeah.
take it all into consideration. You know what? I'm going to spend 15% less this month. And here's how I'm going to do it. And you set that goal. And then in the end, that money goes aside and it feels good. It's like, boom,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I got one checked off, right?
Yeah.
I
It's like building
ran
confidence.
my
New
5 miles,
confidence.
and
Yep.
you build a new base.
Yep. That's
And
cool.
if you think about, as an athlete trains, right, you're building a new base, and then
Yep.
you get to, and then
You
you
level up and you level up and
level
you
up,
learn a little bit
level up.
more. Yep. Exactly.